We are now meeting, and the purpose of this meeting was called for a board training session on the role of our committees. As you know, we operate under a committee work structure, and so I've asked our legal department to provide us with some guidance and some information. And if you have questions at any time, please feel free to interrupt him with those. Thank you. This time I asked our legal counsel, Brandon McPherson, to start the training session.
Good afternoon, board. Thank you. This is going to be a presentation on board committee work. I've been asked to put together this presentation. It's going to go through several items. What are committees? What are the laws and policies that apply to North Carolina school boards and committees? What is the role of the board member? And what does the committee work relate to the board? Or how does the committee work relate to the board? Here are a couple definitions of committees. I will tell you the Robert's Rules I think is more applicable to what we're talking about here, which is a committee is a body or one or more elected or appointed persons who are elected to assembly or society to consider and investigate or take action in regard to certain matters or subjects, or to do all these things. Here are examples of different types of committees. Executive committees are groups that are making decisions when the larger legislative body is not in session. Standing committees are more like what you guys have, which is committees that exist from year to year to serve the body and the community. Special purpose committees serve a specific purpose in time. Committees as a whole are gatherings of the entire body, and that whole body gets together and talks about a particular issue but isn't taking specific action generally. And then task force are typically intergovernmental get-togethers where you're working with other folks and other agencies on a particular issue, like child hunger, juvenile justice, and the like. Here's a list of famous or infamous committees. Point out the Committee of Public Safety and the U.S. Senate Motor Committee. Back to what laws and policies apply to school boards, committees. Open meetings laws regarding your meeting notices. You can have regular committee meetings just like you can have regular board meetings. And that schedule can be published online. And once that is set, you don't necessarily have to notice each one of those. And when you're noticing those meetings, you send out, it's posted on your website. So at any given time, if you change that schedule, you have to provide the public 7 calendar days notice when you change a regular meeting schedule. Types of meetings. So other than a regular meeting, you can have a special meeting or emergency meeting, just like the Board of Education, on 48 hours notice for specials and emergencies or extraordinary circumstances whenever you really have to get a committee together for whatever purpose. Public records laws, because you're doing the public's business, generally speaking, any documents you're looking at will likely be public records unless, I will say, they involve student or employee privacy laws and or personnel files or anything related thereto. Those are simply privacy laws. There are certain occasions where you may get an emergency response plan. If that goes through strategic planning or something like that, that would be another reason outside of your privacy laws, but that's more of a safety and security issue that's protected by state law.
Will you give the, I know what FERPA stands for, but for anyone that might be watching that does not know?
The Family Educational Rights and Privacy Act is what FERPA means. It's a federal law that protects and provides rights to parents on who has access to their students' records, along with directives to educational agencies like the Pender County Schools on how and when we can distribute education records of students and to whom.
Thank you.
Yep.
I got a question about these open meeting laws.
Yes, sir.
So when we were at Raleigh, it was stated, and Beth and I had some questions about this a couple months back, stating that these committee meetings should be recorded. Now, with us not having the majority of the board on there, DPI said this is the law. Now, if you say something contrary, I don't know where we're at.
What do you mean recorded?
So the committee meetings, Dr. Breedlove, help me out here. The
You-
instructor told us or advised us that these committee meetings should be recorded. Is that right?
Well, there's no legal requirement that you have a video stream of your committee meetings. That's not in the law anywhere. Now, they can recommend that all day. There's no legal requirement that this board actually live stream its meetings. That's not a legal requirement. That's nowhere in the law. Now, that can be recommended for sure, especially, I mean, post-COVID, once public bodies started providing access to their meetings via live stream, I think what certain boards have done has provided as an option not only for their boards, for their community, but their community has sort of demanded that.
So we don't necessarily have to go live, but it should, are you saying it shouldn't be recorded or it should be recorded?
I'm saying by law, you're not required to,
Okay.
but you certainly can.
Okay.
Does that make sense? Like there's a difference between legal requirements and what is a good idea or not a good idea, depending on the preference of the board or your community that's telling you, the board, what it wants.
Okay.
And it's often, I would imagine it's probably recorded in a audio format anyway, so that when Mr. Bob goes back, I guess, is that how you normally do that? I know you take minutes and notes, so,
Typically, I would record them, but I take minutes of every meeting,
Yeah.
regardless if it's being recorded.
so there is documentation of what happens.
That's right. I mean, your legal requirements are related to minutes. It's not related to video recordings. If for some reason this board decided to eliminate the minutes, to having a general accounting of your meetings and rely fully on the audio recording, I would say do that at your own peril. I do not advise ever doing that. I think it's a good idea if you're going to do that to make sure you have redundancies. But personally, like as far as open meetings law goes, like there's no obligation to provide, to have recordings or live streams of your meetings.
Okay. Thanks, sir.
Yes, sir. What is the role of the board member? So these are board committees, which means it's y'all's committees. So the concept is you set the agenda, you review the proposals of the administration, you ask questions, you raise concerns, you review information, you make decisions and reports to the full board. And if you're the committee chair, you're the person who's responsible for running the meeting under parliamentary procedure rules. That's the idea behind the committee structure, is that it's sort of a smaller version of a board meeting where you guys get together and you talk about business. And so that's the role of the board member. Now, that doesn't mean that staff isn't assisting you in putting those things together, just like whenever they're putting together the board packets for these meetings, right? Like you have technical assistance from the entire staff putting these board meeting materials together, but it's on the board as the entity to figure out what they want to put on the agendas for any given committee meeting. So, how does committee work relate to the board? Well, committee work originates in a lot of different forms, and that's sort of the thing that I think can get lost sometimes, is that an item can get referred from the full board to a committee. Also, it can be a recommendation from school administration, like, hey, we've got X, and it needs to go to policy committee for vetting because there's a revision to a state law that requires a revision to a board policy. Happens annually. You know, this year it's happening in a big way with the Parents' Bill of Rights. Then there's requests by committee members or board members to have something added to a board's meeting agenda. And so when I think about that, I think about, okay, you know, you may not serve on that committee, but you got a concern about that topic from your district, and you would like the board committee to review that item. I look at that and say that's a way that work can originate for the committee to take a look at. There are other ways it could originate. These are the ways it typically comes up. How does the committee work related to the board? Committees typically take a focused or detailed look on a particular item and then report back to the full board on that particular item. Depending on what it is, it could lead to more questions or a more detailed review by the full board, or it more be like, hey, I've got two board members who have already reviewed this, they've taken a deep dive on it, they have their opinions I trust their review, and with my review plus their review, I support that. And it's typically meant to be a faster way to go about the business of the public, is to have and operate committees. After review by committee, it reports back to the full board with recommendations or suggestions, or decisions not to take action. That happens sometimes as well. How does Pender County DOE want its committees to work? So currently, you have 4 committees. Curriculum, finance, policy, and strategic planning. And so I've got my understanding of what the curriculum committee and each one of these committees was set up to do. That doesn't mean that's what this board wants them to do. But this is what the original intent was back in the spring whenever Dr. Breedlove presented it. And so that's where, this is the discussion part where you guys are looking at and saying, hey, does this seem like what you want this committee to be doing? And do you want additional staff persons on this? Do you like what's going on? And we're just gonna go through each committee, unless anybody's got a better idea. But that's my next steps.
I think it's just a bunch of lost communication. I mean, I think we do a good job as committees. I don't know about the other committees, but Beth and I was talking last night. We do, I mean, we communicate well, but as far as what goes on in policy committee or finance committee,
Across,
I couldn't tell you anything about it, other than when I see the policy on there and I wanna add something to it, it's at the second read, right? So I think that's where we are.
Well, and I know at one time we had addressed this. We were, I think, let's see, we were talking about something that we had, I forget what the topic was. We were in strategic planning. And from that point, I got in touch with Mr. Bankbonner, and we decided that all of the notes at that point would be put on a, I believe it's on a shared drive, isn't it, Mr. Bankbonner? Yes, sir. And so all of the notes now from each committee are put on a shared drive. So we do all have access to what's going on. And I do have to agree with what you're saying though, Mr. Springer. I think that communication is paramount. If we're not all talking to each other, we're not going to know really the finer details of what's going on in these committees.
so I've been other places that do this differently, where they have the chair of whatever committee report out during the meeting about what happened at the committee meeting on the items that are appearing on the agenda related that have come through that committee, as opposed to an administrator doing it. They talk from their seat as a board member, as the chair of that committee, about that particular item. And that way, the engaged conversation can be not only amongst the board themselves, but with individuals on the board who have reviewed whatever item, have whatever opinions they may have on the item, and bringing that way.
I think just my personal opinion, to not have added responsibility on the board member is that with our communications person, to have them, and then if someone had a follow-up to go with the committee. That way there's no misunderstanding. You've got a third neutral person in there. I mean, because you could put your spin on anything. The committee could agree to something and then you could spin it. Yeah, we agreed, but whatever. And then that way it could be, just to get to the meat of it, what is the role of a committee? Let's say just what's up there now, curriculum committee. If something's presented to the curriculum committee, both members of the curriculum committee agree that it moves forward to the board. Then it would go on, would it be considered then, is it an action item or is it considered a consent item?
I think that would depend on the recommendation coming from the committee. If let's say it's the approval of a curriculum. For example, the second grade, social studies curriculum,
Yeah.
for whatever reason. Depending on the recommendation, if the recommendation from the committee is that the board approve it at the next meeting, I would probably put that on action, because that is, but if it's the approval of a contract that's been vetted by the board committee and by legal, you could put it on consent, but at any given time, that contract could get put off consent by a board member and get moved to action. And so I think it depends on the item, but Typically, the effect of something coming through committee is that when it does come up for action, it generally doesn't require a second because at least two board members are already agreeing to move it forward.
So that would need to be addressed in, so if it's on there, it would need to have some kind of
Yeah, this is coming from.
notification coming from committee, and then the chair would say, since it's coming from committee, it would not require a second, any discussion, and then take the vote.
That would be the way.
Recommendation.
Yeah, that's the way it's done other places. Doesn't mean
Okay,
that's
let
the way
me,
you are.
all right, let me ask you this then. Let's say
Yeah.
both members of the curriculum committee shoot something down.
Then
Does that mean it dies in committee and doesn't advance up?
it means one of two things. If a board member wants to add it to the agenda for conversation and it's already come to the committee, then it certainly can come back up. But it comes back up with the knowledge that it's already had two board members who can speak to it and say, hey, we reviewed this committee, we chose not to act on it based on, or we did not want to pursue it. I don't think that anything can technically be dead after a committee reviews it, because currently the policy in Pender County is that any board member can add anything to the agenda, 6 or 7 days in advance. And right now I'm blanking on whether it's 6 or 7, but the requisite days in advance.
And here's the next one then. What if two members of the curriculum committee, one wants it and the other doesn't want it? Does it stay in committee or how does that advance up or stay?
I think it would be, if there's a split between the committee, I think the next reasonable step is to get the full board's take on whatever it is.
That just happened to us last month.
Yeah, I think that's the most responsible thing to do, because otherwise you could have something that gets two no's can be brought up by a committee member. If something got a yes and a no and didn't get a hearing by the rest of the board, I feel like is shortchanging that particular item. So I do, now, I don't think it can ever go on consent if you've got a split vote. I think it may just need to go straight to discussion. But you guys can make your rules about what happens. That's the glory of this. Like in North Carolina, there aren't regimented rules for how it's supposed to go. You can decide how you want that to happen. Like if there's a split vote and you guys say, okay, that means it goes to discussion at the next board meeting. That makes sense to me. But I think that's where you guys make the rules as far as what you want to happen.
Well, what happens then whenever in the committee if something's agreed to and then 24 hours, 48 or whatever time period later, one of the board members changes their mind and wants to do something, then opposite of what was agreed to in the committee meeting, then they're just going, if I decide I want to do something or whoever wants to do something, what is the standard on that?
Well, the standard of that is the last time the public committee got together, they took a specific action. If that member wants to speak to whatever they did, or they changed their mind, they can certainly speak to it at the meeting. But I think at the time, the last public action that was taken was in support of whatever the item is. If they want to withdraw that support at the beginning of the meeting, then it's up to the board as far as how they want to address it, whether they want to, because of that pooled support, if they want to move an item from action to discussion based on that. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. Okay. Yes, sir.
I just want to make sure I'm understanding. So basically, the board, when it's, especially in regular session, can consider any topic, right?
Yeah, as long as it's a regular meeting. Yes, sir.
Right. So our, second Tuesday, 6 p.m. meetings, we can consider anything we want. Even if it's not on the agenda, a majority of the board says, hey, we want to put this on the agenda.
Yep.
Then it gets put on the agenda if there's 3 votes for it.
That's right.
Right? Regardless of what the committees did.
That's exactly right.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
And what's the point of a committee then if you can, if the committees are going to do this, and then you have board members that come in and flip, and I know we all can change our minds, but what's the point of even, then it's a waste of time for us to meet as committees if it's just going to be the Wild West when we get in these meetings, if there's not a gentleman agreement that what is agreed to, there's got to be some kind of standard of how to follow things. And right now, there's not. Right now, it's whoever has the loudest voice can move this forward.
That's where the recommendation for me is that your policies right now do not recognize that you have committees at all. And so what I would recommend is if you were going to continue with the committee structure, that it, number one, A, recognizes that you have committees, and B, either empowers those committees or makes these decision structures for you as far as what happens with those items whenever, you know, let's say you get a split decision coming out of committee. The policy will speak to what happens to that item.
And I'm for these committees. I want that to be on the record. I am for this. I think it can help, make things go a lot smoother in our meetings. But I do believe, that we do need to have some kind of structure so that it's not, this is my opinion, or Don's, or whoever's opinion on a particular subject. This is what the policy states, so you can go back to it, because whoever the next chair is might rule a different way. So I don't know if you've got other,
I do.
school systems that have this, something we can pull from and get ideas. If the other, I'm not directing you to do that, I'm just, if the other members feel like that's beneficial, I'm not for sure. I'd let them speak.
Yeah.
Brent, do you think that would be beneficial to have some kind of guideline of how we should do the work of these committees?
Yeah, we can just add it, Mr. Chair, I think we could add it to the agenda, to come up with policy.
Okay. Has anyone, Ms. Burns?
I agree.
Okay, Mr. Hall, do you concur? That's fine. Mr.
I think the
Cordero?
more information that we have and the more school districts we can look at their policies, the better, we'll be informed about making our rules, so.
I think everyone's okay with the policy structure, I mean, not policy, but the, committee structure, but I think that if we can just get it, this is, if A happens, then B should happen, that kind of thing, and right now, we don't have that.
So essentially, a policy that sets the rules of engagement for how you guys are going to conduct your business in committee.
Correct.
Yes, sir.
And then with cross references to certain things. For example, you have policy adoption, you have multiple policies about how you're going to go about the business of doing policy work. But none of them recognize committees because frankly, you've never had a policy committee before. And so this, I think there are certain policies that will need to be amended specifically for items. Like your curriculum policy needs to recognize that there may need to be approval by the curriculum committee in order for something to be implemented.
Right. I think that if we need an official vote, then we can amend the agenda to put that on there, if we need that. If not, if it's just a verbal, but, I'll do whatever's the recommendation of the board.
I think at this point, you guys want samples of other people's policies to figure out the rules that's what I think I'm hearing. That's more of a consensus issue. You guys can direct me to do anything you want, whenever you want, frankly speaking. You could add it to the agenda tonight and direct me that way, or you can just say, hey, Brandon, go get us some samples for us to look at, and we'll figure out what we like.
I mean, and we'll still meet at our next meetings.
Absolutely.
But just that way we'll have some structure, because the other thing is, when will we, like, if Ms. Burns is on whatever committee, does that mean she's gonna be on that committee and, or, to her term on office ends? Or just to that, is it just a one-year appointment, and then the superintendent opens it up for maybe Mr. Cordero wants to be on that committee instead, or I wanna be on that committee instead?
So typically, they're annual appointments.
Okay.
Is the way.
That was my assumption, but I just would not having it written down.
That's right, and that's right. It needs to be written down, it needs to be followed. And then if the board changes its mind in the future and wants to do a different committee structure, it certainly can.
That's like, I feel like we need probably to have a, and I apologize for dominating the conversation, but I feel like we need to also have a committee for our EC program possibly. That might be, or if some other area, if a board member or Dr. Breedlove, after he's been here now, and he's getting time underneath his belt as our superintendent, he might say, well, let's add this, what's your opinion? I don't know, I mean, or might decide that one of these committees, we don't need it, or can combine with another committee. I mean, y'all tell me, I mean, I'm just, yeah.
Sounds good.
I like having the option to be able to make these committees what we need.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I think that's pretty much what.
That's what I was trying to say. I mean, I was
Right.
just using EC as an example, but yeah.
What about meeting twice a month?
As a what, committees or as a,
As a board, the county commissioners do.
What you mean is like as a substitute for, a lot of committee meetings, let's just meet twice a month as a board, is that what you're saying?
I suggested that years ago.
So adding like a work session?
You did.
Right.
You did.
I have talked about it for years.
What,
To have a real board meeting.
what's your take on this, Dr. Breedlove? You've come from other school districts, so I'd value your input on this.
Cut your decision-making from the board in half. If we had two
Correct.
meetings.
Certainly, I'm unfamiliar with 2 meetings a month, but I know the Board of County Commissioners do that, and I would imagine there's a reason why. The previous district that I'm,
Different
Yes, sir.
business at each one, yeah.
the previous district that I came from had the committees, and that's why I offered that as a change out to the committee of the whole. It was the 1 hour before a board meeting just did not. I did not feel it gave the board enough time to look at stuff, to be able to talk about and to mull it over, that sort of thing. And that's why I brought forth this committee structure. But would be open to it, whatever the board chooses to do, certainly.
And the board chooses to do that, one thing that Don and I have talked about this is possibly is every so often getting into the different schools. Rotated around, so this main meeting would be here, but then give the board members an opportunity to tour a school, get there early enough to meet any of the parents or anything that we needed to accomplish, might be an idea. And that could be something we can talk about for up to January. We're like, not start it here at the holidays, but it could be something.
It keeps things fresher too. Like if someone has a problem or if some emergency comes up, you can, and it probably would make both of them much shorter than what ours are now.
I will tell you, it's pretty common practice to have a work session, to have that work session move around.
It would be a real meeting, but it would just be,
Yeah, no. I will tell you, the only thing that I will tell is, as a practical issue, if you want to live stream that work session, the transportability of your tech, for example, Rockland County Board of Education, they have their work session on at noon, the fourth Monday of every month. And so their IT team comes in, sets it up in the media center or cafeteria beforehand, and they're ready to go. But that is an element of the job, is that part of it is, in order to facilitate that live stream, they show up, get it set up for you guys. And while you're giving your tour or getting your tour of the school with either the local elected officials from that community or other folks, they're getting that room ready for you and set up and ready to go. So
I couldn't
that's-
imagine why Rockingham County would have the best of the best.
does any of the board members have any questions concerning committees? I think we've gotten to pretty much the heart of what we're trying to do, but if you have anything to want to follow up, or anything our legal would like to add to this?
A suggestion of mine would just be, and this is in my experience, that normally when you have committees, the committee has a charter. So the charter is what creates the committee. It says what the topics of jurisdiction are for the committee and the procedures it uses, et cetera. So I think, if we want to stick with the committee schedule, it would be beneficial to have a charter for each committee. So that way the committee members and the public at large would be very familiar with, okay, well, I can look at something and see, what they're charged with and the rules, under which they operate, et cetera, just to be transparent about it. So
And we could also take whoever's on these committees on our website, like underneath, I don't know exactly what committees you're on, Mr. Springer, but, you're on curriculum?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so like on curriculum and, strategic planning, right?
Yes, sir, that's correct.
So on those two, it might just be, committee member and then has dash and then have those two areas of where he's a member of. So that way there's, like he's saying, transparency of who serves on what. I mean, it's just good ideas.
So it's really good ideas. I think it leads to, more transparency and, that one of the goals, as I understand it, from Dr. Breedlove and from this board back in the spring was efficiency. Like the goal was to be more efficient in the doing of the board's business by having the opportunity to review stuff in advance or have it vetted and some questions answered before it gets to the board meeting. But honestly, it's up to the board for how they want these committees to run, and the rules by which you want to conduct people's business.
Okay, Mr. Hall, do you have anything else? Okay, Ms. Burns, do you have anything else?
No, I do not.
Mr. Springer, do you have anything else?
No, sir.
Mr. Cordero, do you have anything else?
No, sir, thank you.
Mr. McPherson, do you have anything else?
No, I think not. I appreciate it.
Okay, Mr. Dr. Breedlove, do you have anything else?
No, sir. I think this has been very beneficial, just to hear the discussion and thoughts of the board on direction for Pender County Schools in order to, we're growing as a system, and some of the changes that you are thinking about putting in place, I think is going to be beneficial.
Okay. Since this was just a training session, we don't need a motion to adjourn. We're just going to go ahead at this time and consider our meeting to end our meeting, and then we'll actually start our official